Well, there's news about Cardinal Bernardine, who was the cardinal in Chicago, and also with Cardinal Cupich, and a horrible, horrible case about molestation. Michael Voris over at Church Militant has broke this story with the documentation. And we are 1 year anniversary of when everything started going public on Theodore ex Cardinal McCarrick. So it's surprising to see that this story, here we are 1 year later, and it just keeps getting worse. We have another cardinal implicated in yet again child abuse, ritual child abuse. So we're going to give some commentary on that topic, and then also talk about maybe the background of McCarrick, some of the things that we haven't spoken about. We never really did a follow-up on our James Grine interview, but that led me to do a lot more research and things that I put in the book Infiltration. So we'll talk about that also today. So, Tim, this is nasty, horrible stuff to read about.
Yes, it is. And it's not by any stretch of the imagination a coincidence that this broke a year after the story last year. I mean, it's take that any way you like, right? That's,
yeah.
I'm sure there are some, once you get a story that's 363 days or 364 days after the breaking of a 2018 story, you wait a day to release it. I'm sure this is behind the investigative, the excellent investigative journalism over at Church Militant, but also it's providence. There's at least two senses in which it's the human brain is wired. We've talked about this before with good Archbishop Vigano's timed releases of his statements. There's something that's hardwired into the human brain to care about feast days, anniversaries, seasons, and all that. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And
I mean, it relates to, just to fill people in, if you've read Malachi Martin's book, Windswept House, his most famous novel, and we've done a whole show on Malachi Martin, and we grant that there's truth there and all that, but we also take a pause. We don't buy in on everything. And we've actually caught some criticism for that because we're not all in on Malachi Martin. Sorry, I don't think it's entirely trustworthy. And we go through all that in the other show. But in that book, it opens up with this just horrific rape scene of a young girl named Agnes. And Malachi Martin always claimed that was a dramatized account of something that really did happen. And over the years, the lore is it involved Cardinal Bernardine, who was then a priest. And these new documents reveal that this seemed to have happened. It's been reported to bishops, cardinals. It was reported to John Paul II, Vatican officials. There's documentation with the protocol numbers on it from Rome, acknowledging receipt. So this was not just a rumor in a Malachi Martin book we're finding out today. This was something that was reported and not directly addressed, it seems, allegedly. There's no documentation that it was followed up on, it seems. And it's sad. It's horrible that, the allegation relates to Bernardine, then Father Bernardine, and Bishop, who was it again? Forgot the name.
That broke, what do you mean?
So it was then Father Bernardine and Bishop John Russell. And this was in South Carolina. And if you read Windswept House, if my memory is correct, the ritual happens in South Carolina.
Yeah. I mean,
not Chicago.
I want to go on record as, not Chicago. I want to go on record as saying I can't speak to that part from that opening chapter in Windswept House, but I did think of when I read 2 or 3 articles this morning, the first thing that my mind raced to was Malachi Martin and the fact that, we'd always been cautiously dismissive, not to say that there's a total lack of truth there, just a lack of evidence. But this is a great for followers of Malachi Martin. without overstating or understating, this is an important piece of the puzzle that certainly vindicates his side of the story quite a bit. This breaking news.
Yeah, it's. I just pulled up In Windswept House by Malachi Martin. He has a Cardinal Liarnadine.
Right. Very
So it's like, I wonder who that, and there's a satanic sex magic ritual that happens in South Carolina in tandem with another one in Rome, in which they enthrone the fallen angel Lucifer. And it describes a sacrilege with the Eucharist and this corrupt sex magic. And so, the story is that the real Agnes, and the girl's name is Agnes in the book, but whoever the real Agnes is, and she wants, when she was trying to get attention from the cardinals and from Rome and from John Paul II, she told the story to Malachi Martin. Again, this is all legend. And then he went and dramatized it and sensationalized it in this book. And then he changed the name. So instead of Cardinal Bernardine, you got Cardinal Liarnadine. It's kind of obvious.
Yeah, I'm surprised they let him get away with that. You know? I mean,
yeah. So it's a really, a lot of people get Windswept House and they read the first two chapters and they read that and like, I'm done. I can't read this book. It's too horrible.
Right.
It's too horrible. So here we are 1 year after McCarrick, and this story that had kind of been a dramatized fictional account in a novel, the details are coming out. And what's frustrating about it is that it seems in these documents that now Cardinal Cupich allegedly had access to these and knew about it. And so that's a problem.
Yeah, the evidence for that claim is strong, that the Cupich connection, right? This is what is being reported over at Church Militant, that Cupich really, by all evidentiary standards, it looks like you can now say he allegedly did know about it, right? Mm-hmm. Until you litigate this thing and, talk about it in 9 or 12 more months, but except this is not, I mean, so that's the constellation of stars here is becoming clear. Maybe that's a bad analogy because constellations never come clear into view as what they're claimed to be. But I mean, the picture is certainly sharpening as a kind of indication of these infiltration type sex magic, satanic connections to pedophilia and ephebophilia in the church. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I mean, this happened. So this sexual assault and we're calling her Agnes. That's maybe not her real name. That's just the name that's used, right? Here's the quote. The sexual assault, and this is from Michael Voris's report today. By the way, I encourage everybody to go over and watch his video that he put up today, in which he explains how the documents came into his possession and what they say, and he gives screenshots of them. Mm-hmm. The sexual assault involved both then Father Bernardine and Bishop John J. Russell, and was part of a satanic ritual involving desecration of the Holy Eucharist. The victim was 11 years old. She was a girl, and it happened allegedly in 1957. Now, this is really important because, again, as we've both said on these videos over and over, and as I say in Infiltration, the evil, the corruption, the Satanism, the sexual perversion did not happen during or after alone in the Vatican II era.
Exclusively in. It did not happen exclusively.
The seeds of heresy, of apostasy, of sex magic, of Satanism in the clergy, in the seminaries and all that happened before that by decades. So we're seeing here a vindication of this thesis. 1957, we have this satanic ritual in which a girl is raped and it involves the Holy Eucharist.
Yeah, which is logically and chronologically required by not only the exigencies of the Second Vatican Council and the spirit of the council, it's required by all claims of either formal or informal conspiracy. I mean, if there's a coming out, proud and gay march planned for today, whatever it is, Thursday, June 20. I don't know what day this will be airing on. Obviously, it prima facie it evidences an existence of gayness and a decided pride in gayness beforehand. Yeah, an active gay pride before the parade. So this isn't we're not going out on any limbs in saying this. That it's not debatable. It's not arguable that if there was, let's say, predominating bad interest, ill will at the Second Vatican Council, which had already, like Skelbick said, planned to kind of use weaponized ambiguity after the council, and it was there and it was somewhat evident during the council. Well, it's just a logical necessity that we articulate the fact that it pre-existed the council. That's just a fact. Yeah.
And remember, this is a priest, Father Bernardine, who goes on to be a cardinal. A priest molesting a child in the 50s goes on to be a cardinal. And he's doing this crime, this satanic ritual, with a deacon, with another priest? No, with his bishop.
Right.
Follow the details here, guys. Right. A priest is in a satanic sexual ritual with his bishop. So we're seeing how the grooming and the recruitment process happens here. This is so important, okay? People are asking, how did we get here? How do we have sexual, predator cardinals? This is how it happens.
Doubtless.
This is how it happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when you read this story, again, everyone go to Church Militant and either listen to it or read it. Church Militant's great because they give you the transcript as the video comes up. But it's easy to get lost in the shock and the awe of what the predicate crime is, but the details matter. This is, your first impression is, oh, wow, another high ranking prelate goes down, another one or two, depending on what ends up happening with Cupich over this. Yes, and that's grabby, but you have to actually kind of slap yourself as you read the article or you hear about this stuff, because the details matter. And this stuff regarding Agnes was my second big realization. And then it brought me back to Malachi Martin. But then littler details that are quite prominent, like the one you just pointed out, the spiritual incest that's happening here.
Yes.
When it's priests being perhaps groomed into doing this by their bishops, cardinals, it goes straight to the top, or almost straight to the top. It's a big deal, not only in the sense that your first impression it yields a real big shock, but your fifth and sixth impression, if you go back and you reread these articles like I was doing before this, it's like a new item of shock will dawn on you with each reread for at least the first 5. I can tell you that because I've reread it about 4 times.
Yeah. And this is satanic in its ritualistic. And it's a spiritual incest. There's an initiation with the bishops and with the priest, and like a passing on with it. I want to read a transcript from our interview with James Grine. This was earlier this year, and I say to Grine, we're both on the show right here, and I say to him, "It's manifest and obvious to all of us because of you and Vigano that dozens, if not hundreds of priests, monsignors, secretaries, bishops, people in Rome knew about McCarrick." So here we're talking about McCarrick, but now we know from these documents that they also knew about Bernardine. Okay. And then I go on to say to James Grine, and by the way, James Grine was a victim of McCarrick. He was molested at age 11, even molested in confession. You can go back and watch on our channel that horrible episode. But it sheds a lot of light on things. I go on to say this was not a well-kept secret, and yet he was promoted to the highest post. My mind goes back to you. You said it for the first time. I hadn't heard this before. that he had a malice to destroy the Catholic Church. Did you see anything that we would call Luciferian, Satanic, Freemason, Black Masses? Was there, people talk about Malachi Martin and going back to the 60s, but were there Black Masses in the Vatican, and the Freemasons were not just undermining the church, they were influenced, but were actually practicing dark arts? Did you ever see paraphernalia or Black Masses or people hanging out with McCarrick who indicated that any of these things were going on in your time with McCarrick? And then James Grind says, without too much detail, it was prevalent. As a bishop and archbishop in New Jersey, first as a star in Metuchen, and then the dramatic changes in Newark. In fact, in Newark, in his archdiocese, he made sure that there was an exorcist in his group of people in one of the closest parishes to him. And he needed that man not to rid the world of Satan, but I believe do the opposite. There was a seminarian that you should speak to about that. There is Google that idea. And that's how I found that guy and those thoughts back in the summertime. And he and I corroborated our stories. And so I said, wait, so you're saying McCarrick, when he was the Archbishop of Newark, he befriended an exorcist to do what? Learn about the devil? And Grind says, no, to help him bring the devil into the diocese. He was a priest. I say, oh, so you're saying the exorcist flipped and sold his soul in a sense. Grind says, so you need to find that seminarian. He's easy to find. So again, he's saying here that there is a spiritual demonic element to this, right? This isn't just like perverted individuals. This is a spiritual war. And they are calling upon the dark entities, the demons, the dark principalities. Yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, look at the quote directly from Church Militant. Under the article is titled Cardinal Cupich Under Investigation. The sexual assault involved both men, then Father Bernardine and Bishop John J. Russell, and was part of a satanic ritual involving the desecration of the Holy Eucharist. Officials are now looking into charges directly related to now Cardinal Cupich's tenure in Chicago involving financial misappropriation and corruption. Those are the two in the article. They're spaced out, but they're the two auto tweets suggested by the Church Militant article. And what I want to suggest is, I'm not going out on a limb here, the connection between sexual and financial corruption that we've seen time and time and time. I mean, you feel uncreative just saying this point because it's so well established, but there's and I don't know what kind of corruption. It doesn't always mean it's a 1-to-1 correlation within the same office, right? So there's usually, I should say, a connection between financial corruption and the financially corrupt prelate is either himself engaged in this kind of sexual corruption. I mean, himself as the principal actor, or covering it up, right? So we don't know, and it's certainly not necessarily true in 100.00% of the cases, but it tends to be showing up in all of these cases. Financial misappropriation, that nice term for that ugly fiscal misdeed. The first place it usually shows up is sexual corruption. And this is something that's also been pointed out and is especially prominent in my mind because of the recent reportings of this guy, Stephen Brady, with the Roman Catholic faithful. He's all over this point, and so is everyone watching, casual observers. You can't deny it.
Yeah. Stephen Brady has covered and written on this story for a while. And we get this, Tim. People say, oh, this is conspiracy theory. Well, look, when there's documents with Vatican stamps on them and protocol numbers, this is not conspiracy theory.
Right.
Something's bad. I mean, look around. Look at the church. Go watch the USCCB meetings. Tell me this is normal. Tell me the church is in a normative state of operation right now. It's not. Things are crazy.
The difference between a conspiracy, which happens, right? Yep. Cassius and Brutus really did conspire to murder Caesar, right? I mean, this is a real thing. Conspiracy at law happens every day. I don't know what percentage of murders are conspiracy to murder charges as well. We have something called in the law merger doctrine, where conspiracy to murder and murder get merged in certain cases. It's a real thing. The difference between conspiracy and what I think the CIA created the term conspiracy theory is falsifiability, right?
Yeah.
A bona fide conspiracy can be evidenced. It can be shown. It can be falsified if not shown. And the simple facts are, I mean, this seems especially relevant to you, Taylor, given the timing with regard to the release of Infiltration, some of your book's detractors, etc. This is evidence of conspiracy, meaning that the coverage of the story is the opposite of a conspiracy theory, the way that term of art works.
Right.
Conspiracy theory is used to show there's no evidence aside from tinfoil hat people who are thrilled and enthralled by going off record, and off record kind of dealing in echo chamber type facts. That's not what we're doing here. The reason this is a story is because real investigative journalism is turning up real nuts and bolts to a case.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't overemphasize. I don't think we have done a good enough job saying there's conspiracy and conspiracy theory. These are opposites. And I feel like in our videos, we always tried, laboriously, well, I think we put in the time to at least say it semi-often. Okay, well, here's the percentage we know. And generally speaking, we're sticking to the public record facts anyway, because we're not interested in conspiracy theory. And of course, the opponents will just say, oh, this is what always happens to Alex Jones for maybe a little less discretion in reporting some stories. He's done a lot of good investigative journalism and commentary in other regards. If you get sloppy once, then you'll forever be branded that way. And I don't feel like on TNT we've ever been that slow, because we toss out a lot going through it really fast before.
Yeah, I mean, how can people confront me and they say, how come you don't, follow everything Malachi Martin says? I said, I just don't find it all trustworthy. I'm sorry. Or
right.
Other people. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Or why don't you quote this document? Well, I don't think we can validate it. So there it is. I want to share a quote from Pius the Ninth. And here's his quote: "The divine judge will seek vengeance on the day of wrath. Until then, no temporal benefit for the people will result from their conspiracy, but rather new increases of misery and disaster. For man is not empowered to establish new societies and unions which are opposed to the nature of mankind. If these conspiracies spread throughout Italy, there can only be one result. If the present political arrangement is shaken violently and totally ruined by the reciprocal attacks of citizens against citizens, by their wrongful appropriations and slaughter, in the end, some few, enriched by the plunder of many, will seize supreme control to the ruin of all." This is 1800s, guys. This is Pius IX in 1849, twice mentioning the conspiracies against the church and against society. 1849.
Yeah.
This goes back. This is old. One of the things that's interesting, because the story's breaking, so it's just, I'm still trying to put together the pieces, but this satanic ritual rape happened in, was it 1957? That was reported? I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So for reference, Cardinal Spellman of New York City ordained McCarrick in 1958. So again, we're seeing late 50s. And in my book, Infiltration, I say some of the worst infiltration in Rome happened between 1954 and 1958. Because in 1954 is when Pius XII started having, extreme stomach issues where they were pumping his stomach on the regular. He wasn't making a lot of public appearances. He was not well. There's just a change in his persona and in his work. And this is when you see guys like Cardinal Bea, Annibale Bugnini, Cardinal Montini gain great influence in the Vatican, in the Holy See, is from 1954 to 1958. So stuff's going on there. I want to share something here, Tim. Have you gotten to page 200 infiltration on the Aleister Crowley stuff?
No, I haven't gotten that far.
Okay, so I think people know who Aleister Crowley is. He was billed as the most evil man on earth. He lived from 1875 to 1947, and he said he wasn't a Satanist, but he was a self-proclaimed prophet, and he was the founder of the religion Thelema.
Right.
He was also a major mountaineer, and so he spent a lot of his time in Switzerland, climbing mountains, exploring mountains. So his religion centered, and I'm reading this from page 200, Infiltration, because it connects Aleister Crowley, his occult, black arts, sex magic to Switzerland, and in particular, St. Gallen, Switzerland. His religion centered on sex magic of the Order of the Templars of the Orient, OTO, of which Crowley was a member. Originally, the OTO was European Freemasonry, but under the leadership of Crowley, OTO was reorganized around the law of Thelema, do what thou wilt, and that shall be the whole law. Unlike explicit Freemasonry, the OTO includes an ecclesiastical and liturgical church, the Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, the Gnostic Catholic Church. So Crowley created a parallel Catholic Church. The purpose of this church is to restore Christianity to its original status as a, quote, solar phallic religion. So associating the sun with the phallus. The OTO is a phallic cult, and its oldest lodge is in Switzerland. The OTO also celebrates the rite of Liber X5, or the Gnostic Mass. Crowley wrote this Mass in Moscow in 1913. So Crowlster, a lot of people they know him. You know, he's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles album. He's on the cover there. He's one of the people.
Right.
And then who's it? Not Dio, but who wrote Mr. Crowley, the song? There's the metal song from the 80s.
Something like Iron Maiden.
No. It's the old singer for Black Sabbath. Dang it. I'm so
Ozzy.
bad at this. Ozzy, yeah. Ozzy Osbourne has the Crowley song, Mr. Crowley.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Ozzy Osbourne. Okay, so this is the Mr. Crowley. Now, he started his own Gnostic Catholic Church, and he wrote his own Gnostic Mass. The liturgy that he wrote in 1913 calls for 5 officers, a priest, a priestess, a deacon, and 2 acolytes who are called children, and culminates in the consummation of a faux Eucharistic rite and the consumption of wine and a cake of light made of menstrual fluid, after which the recipient recites, "There is no part of me that is not of the gods." Right? The Swiss-born Hermann Joseph Metzger became the patriarch of the Gnostic Catholic Church in 1960. There's a picture of him online. He wears a white cassock and a white zucchero, just like the Pope. And allegedly from 63 to 67, they acquired 3,000 hosts from the local Catholic convent nearby St. Gallen, Switzerland. It seemed that these probably weren't consecrated, I'm guessing, right? To use for their rites. And I go on and detail more of this. So what's interesting is that the Gnostic Catholic Church also moves its operation to the same area, St. Gallen, Switzerland, in 1954. And this overlaps the dates of McCarrick in St. Gallen. Right. As you can find on his Wikipedia page or ask James Grind. Right. So we know that just go to his Wikipedia page. McCarrick was taking language courses in St. Gallen during this time period. So there's an overlap there. Is there a for sure connection? Can you prove that the sex magic of Crowley that was introduced and headquartered in this area where McCarrick was, you can't do it at all. But it's interesting that the most perverse form of Freemasonry that had sex magic found its headquarters in the same place where McCarrick says he received his vocation of the priesthood.
See, what needs to happen at this point, I'm absolutely convinced of this, is a investigative, journalistic, probative deep dive into this stuff.
Yeah.
On the ground, because I mean, remember around 11 months ago, 10 or 11 months ago, when Church Militant ran its report and said, look, St. Gallen is all about, communist training ground.
Yes.
And I said, that's super interesting. I buy it. But I'd been hearing that St. Gallen had to do with Freemasons. Some people were telling us this off record. So what's the connection? And Vorst, with all his, strong but limited investigative powers, is like, I don't know about that, but I know communists. You hear both sides of this, and I mean, this is what you're up against when you wrote this book. So someone needs to go there and connect all the dots.
I got something that connects the dots a little bit. So this is a couple pages from before where I just read Infiltration. Vladimir Lenin, who ran the Russian Revolution, the Communist Revolution.
Yeah.
I'm on page 199. He lived in Switzerland from 1913 to 1917. He was exiled from Russia. He was sending his papers right through German Marxists up to give orders and to run things, right? Well, there was a guy named Fritz Platen, and he was a friend of Lenin. He organized Lenin's return to Russia, and he was a native of St. Gallen. He was a Freemason and a communist. And he's the one who figured out to put Lenin in a closed train car to get him all the way up to Northern Europe so he could get to the port and then get back into Russia and finalize the revolution. So it was a St. Gallen guy, a communist and Freemason, who smuggled him out and saved his life. And in 1918, there was gunshots on Lenin's car. Fritz was in the back seat. He jumped up and he pushed Lenin's head down to save him from the gunfire, and he took a bullet to his hand, Fritz. So if he hadn't done that, Lenin would have been shot in the head. So the St. Gallen boy smuggled Lenin out of Switzerland, back into Russia, and saved Lenin's life with his own hands. That was in 1918. And then Fritz founded the Communist International in 1919 as a means of encouraging world communism. So he's a big player. If he's riding in the car with Lenin and he's founding the World Globalist Communist Organization. So that's Fritz. So he's a Freemason. So, I mean, there's some interesting things going on here with St. Gallen. I also want to add that with this sex magic that Aleister Crowley created and popularized, that they have different degrees of initiation. So, for example, the 8th degree is masturbation magic. The 9th degree is heterosexual magic. And the 11th degree is, I don't even want to say it, but it's homosexual magic. It's foul. It's disgusting. It's sodomy magic. So the higher you go in this system, which has its own Catholic Church, its own priesthood, its own Eucharist and all that, the highest levels are these levels of sodomy magic. This is sick. This is disgusting. Ritual sexual magic.
So for the people out there that are still skeptical, this came up in a conversation I was having yesterday. Remember what came out 6 days before the general U.S. election in 2016. I'm talking WikiLeaks with regard to Marina Abramovich, this sex magic priestess.
Was it spirit cooking?
Spirit cooking is sex magic, and inviting. I forget whether it was an email to Tony Podesta saying bring John, or whether it was an email to John saying bring Tony, the two brothers, two of the most powerful men in the world. And, you could go look online. I don't recommend it, but on YouTube, she herself explains what spirit cooking is. And it is none other than sex magic. And Marina Abramovich, is big with the stars. She's like a creative director of a bunch of pop music stars videos now. Mm-hmm. There's a video that came out a few years ago where Lady Gaga eats a rosary It swallows it in the video. And I just happened to have seen, I don't watch Lady Gaga videos or listen to her crappy music, but I had just seen a week before that came out, I think on some Catholic media, that Marina Abramovich was hanging out with Lady Gaga. All kinds of connections to entertainment and
she also
politics
stressed
elites.
the use of menstrual fluid in their rights.
Breast milk, menstrual fluids.
Yeah, which is the same thing we're seeing in the Aleister Crowley rights.
It's sex magic. Yeah, it's a real thing. We all thought it was fake because normal people don't believe it. It's eyes wide shut Stanley Kubrick stuff. And so what do you – this is where society, as it reaches the boiling point of, either accepting this kind of stuff or not. It used to be in the kind of politics as usual 90s and early 2000s, even when horrible stuff would happen, the concept of infiltration, which we talked about, last fall, it was 2 out of 3 of the TNT shows. It was still off the table. It was simply off the table. But now, once all of this stuff has come to light, for me, the Marina Abramovich moment was a big moment looking into it. Also, John Podesta had an email saying we need a Catholic springtime. We need to continue this. He didn't use the word, but it was an infiltration. Yeah, WikiLeaks. These are real emails. You get to see. It turned a presidential election in the U.S. if you people didn't hear about it. We have Trump because of Marina Abramovich and her presence in Podesta's emails. Thank goodness. But this is not deniable stuff aside from Emperor's New Clothes, outfit viewers who are like, no, I see the Emperor's New Clothes. They're lovely. What are you people talking about? Yeah. That's the only level at which certain aspects of this, I'm still trying to be circumspect in my approach here, are deniable, though. There is a spectrum of more probatively evidenced facts that fit within this constellation. With any constellation, since that seems to be where my mind's going today, some stars are brighter than others, right? Yeah. And there's a natural kind of disparity of all even legal theories, which prosecutors put together in every crim law case. But there's a brightness and a dimness of every piece of the equation. But once you have some lead facts, this is really important that people understand this. Once you have some trustworthy, strongly evidenced lead facts, then it's no longer grasping. Ask any prosecutor. It's no longer grasping to say, okay, now that I have 5 really strong key pieces, I am going to include these middle brightness pieces of evidence, Yep. And that's how you build out any theory. If you don't believe me, if you have any family member who's a prosecutor at law, ask them. Then, whereas you wouldn't include, slightly more speculative facts like some of this stuff. This is a perfect example of what I mean by a middle or a mild connection, this Aleister Crowley stuff. You wouldn't include that by itself. But once you have the hard evidence of, okay, St. Gallen in 54, 55, 56, and you have stuff on record, primary source documents, then all of a sudden, including those facts becomes a part in a larger case.
Yeah, I don't have video surveillance footage for the skeptics, but I can tell you that in the 50s, there were satanic Gnostic masses designed by Crowley being said there. McCarrick was there. And then later on, you have this group of self-proclaimed St. Gallen Club people meeting in that city, trying to orchestrate the election of one like Bergoglio. Again, there is not a clear line from dot, like a constellation, from dot to dot to dot. But you look at it and you're like, we're not talking about, they were meeting in New York. Lots of people meet in New York. This is a tiny, small town, medieval town in Switzerland, right? There's a lot of weird stuff going on there. That's what I'm saying. And yes, we can't take the Sharpie and make hard lines from dot to dot, but it sure looks suspicious. It starts to make more sense of the data points than what we didn't have before.
Right. Not initially. Then you throw more time and gobs of money at it and investigative resources. And it's like, okay, so And this is just how history works. This is how, I mean, neither of us are journalists. The way Voris is, we always say this, but when the first guy in, when the first major book in, I guess the first might be Malachi Martin, but that was written as a novel. And I mean, he's partly being vindicated here, but when you write something in a novel, how seriously do you want anyone to take it? Maybe that played a role, but that's hyper speculative because it's in a novel form. So people get mad at us that we're like, well, I don't know what's real. Obviously, there's this key of real characters to fake characters, but but he also said it's faction, it's fact mixed with fiction. He put that out there 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and maybe open the way. That might be a first step, but then you have a second step that's kind of like your book here. It's like, okay, well, here's a reasonable narrative, meta narrative for what could be going on. On the second step, astronomers, how do you spot a nebula cluster in the sky? Every even amateur astronomer knows. It's called look-away principle, right? You look away and you catch nebula clusters with your side vision, right? This is how you do it, and then you can kind of spot when you look directly at it. It's harder to spot than you look away again. That's how you get it. I don't know why that's how vision works, but that's kind of what we're saying here. So you had to have some more light come on it after Malachi Martin. So Malachi Martin fans out there, I was talking to Paul and Olivia Right On Point about this. They agree with us on really most things. They're close travelers, but they think, no, you guys are, they're joking me. Like, you guys aren't Malachi Martin people. I was like, I'm not pro or con. I just literally, when you write a faction novel, what the hell are we supposed to do with that? Because I do like hard facts. Yeah. But now it's seeming to be vindicated. And the long and the short of it is, we're looking more directly at it, and the way now we can to continue to extend the astronomy metaphor. So once you spot it with your side vision, which is kind of what we're doing in step one here, then you can say, okay, it's here. You get a precise location. You get your good telescope out with your clock drive, right? You get your clock drive. You allocate all your resources. You're like, okay, I'm still not seeing it great when I'm looking at it directly with the naked eye, but if I look at it directly with some technology, with some serious resources, right? With investigative journalism, you go and you set up, if there was a major news network that cared about such things, you set up camp there, and then they know that things are coming home to roost. They're like, oh yeah, we're, find us the best hotel, St. Gallen, because we're here for 6 months. We are gutting this place.
Exactly.
That's how it has to work. And
initially sometimes it seems like loose ends, but over time they tie up. And I'll give you an example. So when I first interviewed James Grine, many people questioned his veracity, because in that video he claimed that his Swiss grandfather from St. Gallen, Switzerland, who was the patron of the young McCarrick, that he was the inventor of the Braun girdle. So many people in the comments said, there's no way, he didn't invent the Braun girdle. That's a lie. He's making up stuff, And so this is where the Braun girdle came. So I was like, okay, this doesn't look good, right? If James Grine came on the show and said all these things about McCarrick and St. Gallen, but then he made up something about his grandfather inventing the Braun girdle and being a wealthy man, that's a problem. So guess what I did? I spent a whole day at a coffee shop going through patent records. And I found the exact name of the grandfather with a U.S. patent for, guess what? A new design for the Braun girdle.
Which liars don't expect you to do, right? They just expect that you're going to do that. So you're kind of...
For James Grine, it was a throwaway comment, right? But people jumped on that comment and they're like, liar, liar, liar. Well, guess what? His grandfather did make Braun girdles, and he didn't invent the Braun girdle but he invented the new means by which the Braun girdle was produced and sold here in America.
Right.
It's fact.
That's a check, not an X.
Yeah. And even when this book was coming out, right, and the editors went through and all that, I noticed that footnote was removed. And they thought it, and I asked them, it was innocent. Like, oh, we just didn't understand why a broad girl note needed to be in the book. I was like, no, it has to be there because this was one of the just lame, repeated criticisms of James Grime was on the bra and the girdle that his grandfather been. And guess what? It's legit. He did it. So those are the kind of like micro details that, yeah, you wouldn't expect a liar to research and be able to cast out there. And so, yeah, in these kind of situations, every detail, including bra and girdle or whatever, has to be fact checked, and we have to look into it, and we have to be that careful. And so, yeah, we need somebody to go to St. Gallen, Switzerland for a year and read archives and interview people and talk to people and map out the place and figure out where this monastery was and where this language school is and everything. Go and look at the school. Can I look through the files? Can I see McCarrick's student file? Can I see his grades? What languages was he all that stuff. Someone needs
knock
to do
on
that.
doors.
Yeah.
Say, hey, give me the names. You got to go through town records. Who are the oldest living citizens of St. Gallen? The ones who are freaking 90 or whatever. They do the math, whatever they'd have to be. Find their addresses in the white pages. Go knock on doors. Take 1,000 interviews. This is the next step, right? But people are wanting at this point, some of them innocently, some of them in a corrupt way, are insisting on skipping steps and being like a book like Infiltration, which comes in with a plausible narrative, a very plausible, well-evidenced narrative at this middle step where it's like, shoot, man, I'm not a journalist. I have a family. I can't leave. This isn't what I do. But I'm putting in here a reasonable set of leads. Some are brighter stars than others, and I wouldn't. I'm sure you've said this many times in the last weeks. I wouldn't have written this book if it were a conspiracy theory, right? It's a plausible, well evidenced theory of conspiracy, right? With some very well evidenced facts and some that we need people to pile on.
The St. Gallen stuff we're talking about right here is only 6 pages in a 300-page book, right? I mean, it's not about the book Infiltration is not necessarily about St. Gallen or about Aleister Crowley. That's just some footnotes and some interesting choice data along the way. The thesis is a historical trajectory of theological and moral infiltration of people who don't believe the Catholic faith, every jot and tittle. Those people get into the church and start leading the church. Right. Can anyone honestly look us in the face and say, no, that never happened? Everyone in the hierarchy, every single pope we've had, have all been canonized saints and just firm supernatural believers in everything in Catholic dogma. No, it's obvious that that's not the case.
They try to take a middle road, don't they? And say, well, not everyone's perfect, but they accuse you of perfectionist fallacy. And they take this middle road where they say, well, there have been a few of those, but what you need to evidence, they make the standard of the burden of persuasion, the standard of proof, we call it, super high. The burden of persuasion is super high, where it's like, yeah, I know there's some non-perfect guys. I know there are even a few evil ones, but what you have to show, beyond a shadow of a doubt, even now, early in the process of this in 2019, is beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was a widespread conspiracy. Well, guess what, people? The more this thing goes on, kind of like you said with your bra and girdle research, the more granular the evidence gets. And today's, that's why we're covering today's story. Yeah.
Yeah. Today is, wow, that legend of Malachi Martin in Windswept House. There's actual Vatican documentation with stamps and signatures on it talking about it. It's not just a Malachi. It's not just like a chapter in a faction novel by Malachi Martin.
Right. Remember that show Mythbusters? You know how they do a stamp for like busted or whatever the green stamp is, not busted. That's what we have here. At a certain level, people need to be operating. This is what I've said time and again about the 3 different burdens of persuasion in American law. The one corresponding most to the way the human mind works is is preponderance of the evidence. 51% up or down, right? That's how we, the other two standards are higher and maybe need to be for their particular place within American jurisprudence. But it's a green stamp or a red stamp. Is this on the whole up or down? And it's a slam dunk when you talk about the kind of vindication that we're seeing here today, the kinds of, even we were getting, oh, you're not being charitable to Supich. I'm even remembering some of those right now back in the fall. And it's like, look, where there's smoke, there's fire. And that doesn't mean that we can start the punishment phase, when it's only smoke. You gotta evidence that there was a fire first before you could take away someone's life, liberty, property, take away their hat, whatever. But when there's smoke, it means you need more resources. You need more people to jump on. And that's why church militant's so good, because they're tending to this. And look what they're uncovering. I mean, look what they uncovered today.
That's what we were saying when we first started making videos. After the Summer of Shame was the moment when so many people were like, you mean almost everything that Boris has been talking about could be true? That was a moment where we're like, wait, there's these pipelines of sex trafficking that goes through seminaries. And I mean, we also need to remember that Cardinal Bernardin was accused of sexual assault in 1993 by a man who died of AIDS. Again, it's just an accusation, right? But it's, now with these new documents that are coming out with Vatican protocols on them. Also, Bernardin, how did he become cardinal? John Paul II. John Paul II made this guy cardinal, just like McCarrick, just like a lot of these rotten apples. Mahoney, right? It's also interesting that Grind said that McCarrick and Bernardin were best buddies. Often would go to Chicago to visit with Bernardin.
Yeah,
part of this network.
I remember that.
Yeah. So
Chicago is the real dark spot. Yeah.
Chicago. I think New York, Chicago, and LA all had their dark clergy. We're seeing, I mean, LA had the most in the history of all Catholicism, the biggest payouts, the most abuse cases, and all that was LA.
That's right.
And no one seemed to talk about that, I guess, because Mahoney's still alive or something. But, it is, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I'm going to look up the number because it's absolutely scandalous of how much money was paid out in California. And you can go online, you can find the different, here it is, cases in the US. So, Angeles, pardon me. Here we go. 6 in 2007, from the tenure of Mahoney, 600 million to 500 victims.
Wow.
The previous year, they did 60 million to settle 45 lawsuits. That's over $700 million in 2 years with over 500 victims, alleged victims.
And the size of the average individual payout matters too, because we would say that this corresponds to the veracity of the claims, right? So if they're averaging about over 1 million per with that first payout, that's over 1 million per alleged victim. That means that these guys are all good. That means that on the average, those claims are true, right? I mean, any payout doesn't necessarily, people have to be careful. Any payout at law doesn't mean guilt, because a lot of times people are like, okay, here's the top line, here's the bottom line. Let me see how I can, cheapen my bottom
Save
line
money.
and just pay out because here are my attorney's fees and here's the opportunity cost my business will go through if I go through an 18-month trial. But yes, with 1 million plus average payout to the alleged victims, that means that a lot of those are true. That's just what that means. They don't do that otherwise. That's a lot of money. I mean, that's a big average kind of.
We're getting up to $1 billion in one diocese, LA. Imagine that. I mean, just to give people, so it's over 700 million payouts in LA under Mahoney. But just the number 2 payout, I'm looking at the graph here, is the Diocese of San Diego with 198 million payout to 144 recipients. So that's over $1 million average per recipient there. So 700 something million. And then number 2 is San Diego with 198 million, which is a lot lower by a long shot. Granted, LA's big, but we're talking about a major sexual scandal and crisis that happened in LA, and no one's talking about that. I mean, it's New York, Chicago, LA, right across the country.
Yeah. The seminary, assuming most of those guys, I don't know where they'd go. Yeah, because I'm kind of in between Southern California and Central California. So most of our priests go through St. John's in Camarillo. But there's probably a mix of LA and San Diego priests. I don't know if you know it, but LA and San Diego are, 100 miles apart. Yeah. So this is close. These right. Not twin cities, but they're almost like twin cities. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that about San Diego. I did about LA. Yeah. That's a lot of corruption. What I think Grind told us, if I'm remembering correctly, is that Chicago was maybe not the payout capital, but the real maybe center of the demonic sex stuff. For whatever reason, this is the epicenter. There's also connection there. Your book talks about it a little bit between Alinsky's work in the upper Midwest, right? Alinsky's work with
Chicago,
a guy named Egan, who I think became one of Notre Dame's presidents, Father Egan. Yeah, Chicago and all around Chicago, big city, all those big cities in the Midwest around Chicago, they all, it just all points to Bernardine, this Bernardine centerpiece. Bernardine was the lodestar that all these American prelates seemed to track.
That's right. And again, it raises the question for all of us. Any good-natured practicing Catholic wants to know, how is it that McCarrick and Bernardine got to the top spots?
Right.
That's not an accident. Right. The machinery to elevate priest to bishop, and then in particular to elevate bishops to cardinal. There's a whole congregation in Rome for bishops, right? And then the vetting for the cardinals is another whole thing, and it's a committee work. It's not just the Pope, looks through his Rolodex and like, he'd be good in a red hat. He'd be good in a red hat. Doesn't exactly work that way. So how is it that these men? Bernardine is known for his interfaith work. He's known for the seamless garment, in which he says, you can't just be against abortion. You got to be against death penalty. You got to be for government housing. You got to be for immigration, or you're not pro-life. Right. That's the Bernardine thesis. Right. We get that thanks to him. And just, he's a major ecumeniac. He loves ecumenism. He loves the interfaith dialogues. He was well known for that. If you read his legacy page, that's what it talks about, So it's sort of the things that we talked about previously in the last show about the Amazonian religion of, all religions have these placeholders that, according to Rahner and Balthazar and others, they have these signifying placeholders in which the presence of Christ is available to the non-Christian. That's all going on here too.
This is from October 20. Wow. This article by John Zmirak on the stream is from October 26, 2016. That's 1 week before the WikiLeaks, the key WikiLeaks dump came out. There's a civil war raging within Christian churches, which outside forces are ready and eager to exploit. Last month, The stream highlighted an open letter from evangelical Christian leaders that warned of pro-choice, anti-marriage billionaire globalist George Soros, his attempts to co-opt and corrupt Christian churches in the service of leftist causes. This month, we learned how Hillary Clinton's campaign is involved in supporting sock puppet pro-choice Catholic front groups to undermine the Middle Ages dictatorship. That's a direct quote of the Catholic bishops. This week, I warned at Catholic Vote of a new scheme to recruit disgruntled Catholic millennials for globalism and socialism. This war is nothing new, and I'm always talking about where Zmirak's going here. Wolf in Sheep's Clothing is a chilling new documentary aimed at faithful Catholics, now available in streaming format. The film shows how this effort to corrupt Christian churches goes back decades to the organizing work of Machiavellian leftist Saul Alinsky. You remember him, don't you? Alinsky was the subject of Hillary Clinton's college thesis, mentored her by mail. Ben Carson mentioned him. It goes on to talk about Phyllis Schlafly and George Neumeier. And the connection, there's all kinds of connections because where Alinsky worked to Bernardine. And again, I can't say it enough. Everyone needs to go watch this EWTN documentary. It's EWTN, yes. Wolf in Sheep's Clothes. Go watch it. All of these connections are half the time they're growing more of a web in my mind as we're shooting the shows. Just Chicago, I can't get over Chicago really seems to be the place for the pedo satanic stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just reacting to news.
And the really scary part is, Alinsky is open. I mean, he dedicates the book to Lucifer, the first rebel. He writes Rules for Radicals. He's openly infiltrating Catholic and Protestant churches in the Chicago metro area. He's also meeting with Cardinal Montini. It's in the book. He meets 3 times with the future Paul VI. When Pius XII dies, after he's met with Montini 3 times, and someone says, who will be the next pope? He says, I don't know. But if it's Montini, the drinks are on me for a long time. Now, Roncalli was elected as John the 23rd. But after Roncalli died, Montini was elected, Paul VI. He's the one who guided and ended the Vatican Council and also instituted the new Mass, the Novus Ordo Missae. So, I mean, it's crazy that you have a pope who was meeting with Saul Alinsky.
Wait, Alinsky said if Montini is elected, the drinks are on me? Who said that quote? Really?
Alinsky said that.
Yeah, I think you said that.
Saul Alinsky said that. So, that's one thing. People read Infiltration and they're like, wait, that Paul VI, like that can't be true, and it is. I mean, it's documented. He met with them. Now, you could just say he just met with them and they talked about sports and football and soccer. Okay, maybe they did. But when you read Jacques Maritain, he makes it sound like that Montini, future Paul VI, is a fan of Saul Alinsky. Yeah. He might have said, well, if he's elected, the drinks are on me because he found out in his 3 meetings that they were both Chicago Blackhawks fans. Yeah.
But that's not really likely. That's not what, right? So people want to say, oh, well, you didn't prove anything. It's like, well, I didn't set out to prove anything. I set out to strongly evidence something. There are different phases. There are different waves in the evidentiary process. And until we get this real straight, for better or for worse, there's a stronger emphasis on it. And say, don't expect too much. There's a weaker emphasis on it and say, don't treat this like it's too little, right?
Yeah.
These connections are necessary in this wave of, your book came out within the first year of the McCarrick thing. So that's great turnaround time. And this is a lot of, these are all signposts that have presented themselves, but collecting them in the form of your book, Infiltration, is invaluable work, right? Now, people have to pile on particular facts and go, this is how things have to work. I would say it's unrealistic and it's unfair to expect, the first major collected work on something that comes out to be written as if it happened 50 years after McCarrick came out. right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is
I'm gonna have to write
just,
Infiltration 2, Infiltrate Harder. I've already decided that's going to be the it's like Die Hard, Die Harder.
yeah,
You know, Die Hard 2, Die Harder. This is going to be Infiltrate 2. Yeah. Infiltrate Harder. Hey, I want to share that quote with you. So this is Jacques Maritain, and he's talking about Saul Alinsky. And it says, the new Cardinal, Montini, the new Cardinal was reading Saul's book and would contact him soon, end quote.
Wow.
So Montini is making a study of and remember, Saul Alinsky is the guy who created community organizing. Community organizing is another way of saying community infiltrating. You get to know everybody.
Identity politics.
Yeah. You're like, these people are against you. These people are against you. Here's our agenda. We need to have some microaggressions. You know, we need to have people show up. One story of Alinsky is he fed a bunch of homeless people beans and had them show up at this rally for them to fart and stink up the place. So Alinsky actually did that.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, actually. So that's the kind of thing. It's these microaggressions, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about Saul Alinsky is he's definitely the neo-communist. He's not one out there like, let blood run in the streets, kill our enemies, you know?
Right.
He's not that.
Yeah.
He is hey, let's do the permanent instruction of Alta Medida. Let's slow the roll. Let's go slow. Let's infiltrate. Let's change ideas. Let's grow our group.
Right.
And there you go.
What book was being referred to in that quotation you just read?
Says he's Saul's books.
A book?
It says Saul's books.
Have you published Rules for Radicals yet?
Let's see.
Rules for Radicals came out in...
I'm trying to... Let me see if I have written down here when Rules for Radicals
69?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I'll look that up for next time.
Yeah.
But, I mean, remember, Alinsky is active in the 50s. I mean, that's what he's...
I know.
Yeah.
Listen to this. From the same Smerak article. The high tide of Alinsky's direct influence in the church came in 1978, when his clerical allies seized control of a national meeting of Catholic lay leaders, the Call to Action Conference. Using Alinskyite tactics to make sure that leftist dissenters from key Catholic doctrines were appointed to key positions, these radicals tried to transform the Call to Action into a kind of American Catholic parliament. Pretending to speak on behalf of all American Catholics, they demanded that the church change its age-old teachings on contraception, ordain women priests, and embrace, quote, gay liberation. So, I mean, this is 2016 when these things...
What year was that?
Is 1978.
Yeah, 78.
At the Call to Action.
Over 40 years ago.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So... Yeah, I mean, this is a long arc, and I really think that that's the contribution of infiltration. Is it's not a light switch. It's not like, you know, Pope Benedict resigned and then someone hit the light switch and things got bad. It's not like it was just Vatican II and things got bad. It's something that has been brewing on purpose, fermenting for a long time.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's... Chicago seems to be the epicenter. That's why we're going off in all these Alinskyite directions. Jacques Maritain, all of the connections in the American church seem to come from Chicago. So when a story like today's story on Church Militant breaks regarding Cupich's potential cover up for, this forerunner in Bernardine, you should think when you hear Chicago, your antennae should go up. Chicago in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s in particular, for those 4 decades, your antennae should go up. And even the 2000s under the watch of Cupich. But we've talked before about how he's kind of careful. He's he's the neo Marxist infiltrator in the church, because he's even more careful than the Alinskyite, era guys.
Yeah, he's not going to write
Bernardine.
a book called Rules for Radicals. Even that's flying your flag.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should wrap up here. I want to share this final quote from Alinsky. This is an interview with him before his death in Playboy magazine. Saul Alinsky. He says, if there's an afterlife, I have any, and I have anything to say about it, I will unreservedly choose to go to hell. Playboy magazine interviewer says, why? Alinsky says, hell would be heaven for me. All my life, I have been with the have-nots. Over here, if you're a have-not, you're short on dough. If you're a have-not in hell, you're short on virtue. Once I get into hell, I will start organizing the have-nots over there. Playboy magazine. People. Why then? Alinsky says, they're my kind of people.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is people say, who would choose to go to hell? Who would choose to go to hell? A guy like Saul Alinsky openly, just before his death, in an interview with Playboy magazine, said, I would want to go to hell. Right. So that's pretty scary. It's really scary.
Yeah. Well, Luciferianism is Lucifer didn't choose to go to hell. He's banished there, but it's an anti-kingdom, right?
Right.
And it's an opportunity in an Alinskyite way to have your own people and to lead someplace. Better to be first in hell than second in heaven. This is the Luciferian credo.
That's right.
So yeah, it makes sense. There are real people like this. There are shocker kiddos. There's real evil out there, right? I mean, and when you hear about spirit cooking and sex magic and molestation involving the Eucharist, Eucharistic rituals, which we're hearing today, there's real evil out there. I just rewatched that movie, The Rite, with Anthony Hopkins last night, and it's so annoying. Me and my buddies were yelling at the screen. We're yelling at it because the main character is this agnostic priest who's being brought in to see exorcisms, and he keeps thinking, psychology. I need a psychological explanation. He's seen like tons of stuff. He's not believing his own lying eyes. He's seen more stuff than you or I have seen and still not believing. And this is the kind of idiotic bourgeois 2019 middle class attitude about matters spiritual and religious. Like, they're seeing good evidence. I mean, this guy had more evidence to believe than we did, and of course, it's a fiction film, but it's very typical of, I think, IQ 100 sort of mediocre intellects. They've been so trained to say, I want more evidence, that you're producing good evidence in front of them, and they're just trained to say, I want more. They don't even know how to critically.
And what's the counter response? Well, here's what you hear. Well, these were priests. They just didn't receive a good seminary training. That's how the church got to where we are right now.
Right.
Bad training in seminary. That's it. The priests weren't taught how to pray the rosary and read Thomas Aquinas. I mean, that's a problem. Agreed. But that doesn't account for all the horrors we're seeing right now in the church. Dogmatic and moral.
Right. Well, that's a part of it, but that's kind of the least grabby, least interesting, least important part. It is part of it.
It's part of it.
It's a weaponized.
The Alta Vendita says, cast your nets into the seminaries. I mean, it's all the way back into the 1840s, but there's a lot more going on here. And I think this new story with Bernardine is going to continue to rip open the curtain to see what's there. So, okay, Latin word of the week relates to this. It's actually a Greek word that comes into Latin, pandemonium. Pan is Greek for all. Daimonium comes from the word demon. Pandemonium is all the demons. So like when you say, it broke out into pandemonium, you're talking about like what it would be like to be in the kingdom of Satan with all the demons. And we know from theologians, all the demons hate each other. There's no friendship among thieves. There's all malice towards one another, and there's malice towards us. Right. They want us to go to hell. So pandemonium is not just like your kids are going crazy and spilling cereal on the floor. Pandemonium is the breakout of the screeching of hell.
It's not a conspiracy, though. Kids really do spill tons of cereal on the floor. It happens. It's just
what we do, Tim? I have an interdict on cereal in my house. It just never comes in.
Really? Oh, I couldn't do that.
We have no cereal because with the 8 children, it's like a confetti parade of cereal on the ground.
It's a lot.
And
we sweep a lot.
No, I'm convinced no child under the age of 14 can carry a bowl of cereal with milk in it without spilling it on the floor. And I would actually pay for tests to prove that.
No,
Even a
I know
14-year-old can't carry the bowl from the kitchen counter to the table without spilling the milk in the cereal on the floor.
That's a fact. That's
it's
just
a
a
fact.
scientific fact.
So for
But I
those
couldn't do
reasons,
without-
it's kind of like
Yeah.
in Singapore, they banned gum because they don't want gum on the sidewalks. Like,
Yeah.
so there's no gum. That's how I am in my house. No cereal because I'm just tired of the cereal. And my wife, like in the last couple of years, bought some cereal, and then there was it was dumped out entirely on the ground. And she was like cleaning it up, and I was like, "This is why we have no cereal." She's like, "You're right. I'm never going to get cereal again."
I can do it, man. I'm Jerry Seinfeld. I eat cereal like 3 times. I eat cereal before bed. It's all the sweet cereals.
I haven't eaten cereal in 10 years, decade.
Wow.
Speaking of decades, everybody got to pray that rosary.
That's right. Pandemonium. There's a rumor going around that John Milton made that term up because he
I've
knew
heard that.
languages in Paradise Lost.
I've heard that he coined it.
Yeah.
Because that's the name of their like city.
Yeah.
In Milton's Paradise Lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
He calls it, and I have heard that he's the one who coined that.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool term, but did you find out that it was someone else, or did he really coin that term?
I forget what I turned up. I think it's real. I think I learned it in like AP English class in 12th grade or something.
Right. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, let's everybody pray the rosary. If you're not praying the rosary, you're not doing what Our Lady said at Fatima. You're not on the team. We have to break the bonds of these demonic powers. They're real. These are real demonic bonds. We aren't strong enough or smart enough to do them as Catholics, but Jesus, and through his grace, the saints, and especially Our Lady, do have this power to crush the head of the wicked demons. So that's why we turn to her and we ask for her to look to her son and for these evil spiritual bonds to be broken. So we'll say a prayer. Tim, you want to say Hail Mary when I finish the prayer?
Sure.
Okay, cool. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Dear God, we hate to read and hear of these crimes against your people, against those who are made in your image, and we ask that you would bring real justice against those who have harmed others, and also forgiveness for all those who are involved, and true repentance. We ask a protection over your church. We ask Our Lady to spread her mantle around the church. We ask the blood of Jesus to purify the church and the blood of Jesus to drive away all demons in this church. And we ask that you would bless and protect us and everybody watching today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. All right, everybody, like the video, subscribe, share it. We'll see you next time.
All right. 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 All right.